Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying for this last round of presentations. Again, just to remind the audience, this we are showcasing research work project undergoing currently being implemented in Africa that seeks to improve food environment. And our first presenter today would be Milka. She's going to talk about food marketing around schools. So Milka, I see you've already shared your slides, so you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Silva, and for the opportunity to present our work in Kenya. So my presentation will be on marketing of food to children on TV and how it influences food behaviors of children and adolescents in Kenya. This is part of a larger project, the Global Recap project that was implemented between 2020 and 2023 in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. My name is Milka Wanjohi, and I work at the African Population and Health Research Center. The slide. So a bit of a background, food marketing, as we have heard from previous presenters, is one of the macro level food environment driver of food choices and behavior. And when it involves unhealthy foods, then it could drive unhealthy dietary behavior, and in the long term, lead to poor health outcomes such as diet-related non-communicable diseases. One of the recommendations from WHO to address the growing burden of NCDs is to formulate policies to regulate and restrict marketing of unhealthy foods to children. But most countries in the SSA region have not adopted these recommendations. And in our previous engagements with the policymakers, they have highlighted inadequate local evidence that could inform the formulation of such policies as one of the challenges that they're experiencing. A recent review by Karanja and others also has shown evidence gaps on food environment data that focuses on food promotion, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So the aim of this study was to assess the frequency and nature of food and beverage marketing and advertisement to children and how it influences their food perceptions and behaviors. It was a mixed method study with both quantitative and qualitative components. The quantitative components use the INFOMAS protocol for assessing food advertisements on TV and radio, but my presentation will focus on the TV advertisements. So this quantitative component involved whole day recording of TV stations and later analyzing to see what foods, what advertisements were aired on the TV stations, what proportions of them were foods, and what kinds of foods were advertised. So to identify the TV stations where the recording would be done, we first did a purposive selection of the most popular TV stations based on our Communications Authority of Kenya ratings, and we identified NTV, KTN, and Citizen TV. And then we did a random selection of the months where the recording would be done. We identified December of 2021 and January and February, capturing a vacation period when children are at home and 2 months of school sessions when children are at school, just to see if there are any variations in the advertisement. We then use stratified sampling to pick days on weekdays and also weekends. And then randomly, I picked 4 days on weekdays and 4 days on weekends on each of the months. So we ended up with the 24 days of TV and radio recording, but I'll talk about just TV recordings. So we excluded national holidays and special events just to ensure that the recording represented a typical broadcasting. And then the recording on each day would start early in the morning, at the beginning of the day, at 6 a.m. in the morning, and throughout the day until midnight. For the qualitative component, we conducted interviews with children and adolescents 10 to 18 years in 3 counties in Kenya. We had Baringo County representing a rural county, Nairobi representing a city on urban county, and Mombasa representing a coastal and a tourist site. We also talked to parents just to collaborate or add on to the information that we got from children and adolescents. So the discussions with the adolescent focused on what advertisements they had seen recently, what exactly was being advertised, where they had seen the advertisement, and when the advertisement was made in terms of the time of the day. We also had discussions around what was their favorite advertisement and why, what they remembered most about the advertisement, and then what happened after watching or listening to advertisements. So in terms of the analysis of the TV recording, most of it is descriptive analysis, looking at the frequency and the types of food advertised, promoted on TV. Based on the Infomas protocol, we categorized the foods that were categorized into core foods, the healthier options, including staples, fruits and vegetables, milk, meat, eggs and legumes, and the like. And non-core foods, the unhealthier food groups like industrial breads, processed meats, sugar-sweetened beverages, chocolate, candy, and fast foods. And we had other miscellaneous food group of the food recipes like cubes, oils, tea, and coffee. For the qualitative analysis, this was a thematic analysis based on the three main components of marketing and advertisement, focusing on exposure, what TV stations the adolescents and the children mentioned, what type of food, what time, and the frequency of advertisement. Power, looking at the strategies of mainly on the question of what they remembered most and what they liked most. To be extracted strategies around, strategies that are used to capture or attract children attention. And then on the effect, we looked at how the advertisement influenced their food perceptions, preferences, purchase, and consumption behaviors. So on the results, I'll start with the TV recording results. So in total, we recorded 3,700 advertisements over the 24 days. Most of them were non-food, about 64%, and a third were food advertisement. Looking at the type of foods categorized by core and non-core, most of the foods advertised were non-core, the less healthy options, about 82%, and a smaller proportion of the healthier food options. Breaking down the food groups and into the specific food items. So on the core food group, the staples like maize flour, wheat flour, rice were the most commonly advertised food groups or food items, while on the non-core, the less healthy options, sugar-sweetened beverages were the most commonly advertised, followed by candy and chocolate and sweets, and then fast foods. Looking at the time when these advertisements were recorded, we can see that the non-core foods, a higher proportion of the core foods, the healthier options were advertised in the non-peak viewing times. So in the categorization of the times, we used the Kenya Communications Authority of Kenya categorization of peak viewing times for children and adolescents, which is between 5 p.m. in the evening and 9 p.m. at night. So for the core foods, most of the foods or a higher proportion of the foods were advertised during the non-peak viewing time, but for the non-core foods, the less healthier food options or food groups, a slightly higher proportion of the foods were advertised during the peak viewing times. So this is a trend indication of the food advertisement from when we started recording to when we stopped recording in the middle of the night. And we can see that generally there was a lower frequency of advertisement for core foods, the green curve, and a higher proportion or higher frequency of advertisement of the non-core foods. And the peak, the trend starts increasing around mid-morning and peaks. The highest peak was around 5:30, 6 until 9, which also is the peak viewing time for children. So most of the non-core, the less healthy options were being advertised at the peak viewing times for children. So on the qualitative findings, I mentioned that we looked at exposure, power, and influence. So on the exposure, we read through all the narratives or the discussions with the adolescents and picked out the foods that they mentioned having seen on TV. And most of them fell in the non-core food group and less on the core food category. In terms of the TV stations and the time when they remembered seeing the advertisements, most of the stations that they mentioned were the most popular TV stations, KTN, Citizen, and NTV. And these are also free to air, meaning that any Kenyan who has a TV can access these stations. Most of the advertisements that they remembered were on TV. Very few talked about radio and other non-media sources. In terms of time, they talked about evening, after school, when they're watching TV. And in terms of specific times of the day, it was during local TV programs. They mentioned most of the popular TV programs in the country. Most of them are aired in the evening, and a few of them are aired during the weekend when most of the children have access to TV. And also just before, during, or after news broadcasts. And we have some of the excerpts from the discussions. In terms of power, so these are some of the strategies used in the advertisements to attract the attention of children. So again, this was mainly from the discussions on what do you remember most and what do you like most and why. So from those discussions, we picked one strategy as the use of content for children. So they remembered most of the advertisements, the songs that they saw, what characters were there. They would talk about children, advertisements that have children in them, advertisements that have school, that have students, that have young boys and girls doing activities, that have families that are aspirational with mother, father, grandmother, enjoying family meals. So those are some of the things that we picked as why they remembered or liked the advertisements. And most of the foods that they mentioned again were in the non-core food category. So another strategy that we picked from these discussions was the use of fun activities or sports activities that children liked or identified with, like dancing, short acts, instruments, and things like that. So again, the use of fun activities for children, the use of characters and cartoons. So they would describe some of the advertisements as they remembered having animal characters, having cartoons that they enjoyed. So again, as a strategy, the use of celebrities. Again, they remembered seeing celebrities in some of the advertisements, celebrities that they liked, musicians, actors, and comedians in the country. We have some of the excerpts here. So other general strategies that may not necessarily be targeting children were product quality claims and offers. For qualities were like new tastes or new flavors or new colors in the market, issues around convenience, that some of the, especially fast foods that would be delivered on the door. So they also talked about, or we extracted information around claims, zero sugar products that are considered or advertised as healthy because they have less sugar, or some that are natural, or others that provide energy, especially for students to study or young children to grow and things like that. And then also price offers and free gifts. So the last component was the influence. So what happens after you see this advertisement? So the thing that we identified as most prominent in the discussions was the brand recognition and recall, how they would remember the advertisements from the beginning, when it happens, who is in the advertisement, what they do, the songs, and also the discussions with the parents. They would also reflect on how their children sing along the songs, how they remember exactly the brand names. So again, creating brand recognition and recall. So again, on food behavior, so the desire to purchase or consume the food that they were seeing on the TV. So they would talk about longing for the food that they have seen. Like we can see in the first excerpt saying that they long for the drink that they have seen, but the only thing that they don't have is money, meaning that when they get money, that's the first thing that they might prioritize, feeling like they want to drink or eat the food that they have seen. And also parents talking about how when a child gets a shilling, Kenyan money, the thing that they want to buy as fast as possible is what they have seen on the TV. So also the perception that the food being advertised is better than the regular food that they are being prepared by their parents at home. We can see here some of the parents reflecting and talking about when they prepare the food that the child has seen on TV, even when it's less healthy, then they enjoy and eat more of it than when it's the regular food that is prepared in the house. Also the issue of influencing or pushing the parent to purchase the food that they have seen. So the parents would talk about how the children push them to buy products, constant reminders to buy a product whenever they are leaving or going to the shop, talking about where exactly they would find the product from what they have seen from the advertisement, talking about the offers that are available when they need it or what they have seen on the TV, and creating a lot of anxiety around the parents and pushing them to buy the product that they have seen. So in conclusion, from the TV recordings and also the discussions with the children and adolescents, we can see that less healthy foods are more commonly advertised and liked and remembered, because these are discussions around what they remember and what they like. TV was most popular in these discussions, perhaps because it combines both audio and visual. They can see what is being advertised. There are also different strategies that are used to target children, from the cartoons to the price offers to the characters to children content, all these targeting children. And these advertisements influence how children perceive food, the foods that they prefer, what they're seeing on TV rather than the regular home foods, the foods that they want to purchase and consume. And sometimes from the discussions with the parent, this extends to the family, because parents, when a child asks a parent to buy a certain food, sometimes it ends up being the food that is consumed by the whole family. So based on these findings, again, the recommendation is that we need to implement or formulate policies and interventions to limit unhealthy food exposure from the advertisements and promote healthy food advertisements. Something else that we also see in these discussions with the children and adolescents is that the children pay very keen attention to the advertisement. They remember a lot of the details. And so this is a good avenue to advertise and promote healthy food, so that they also remember the healthy foods as they're remembering the unhealthy food options, as we see in the discussions.
Look, I hope you're wrapping up.
All right, so I have finished this. This research recap project was funded by IDRC, and to also acknowledge the partners who are involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Milka, for this very excellent work on around TV food marketing to children. That's a very exciting topic, and the qualitative bit of the work too is superb. I would just like to remind all presenters that the time is pretty much limited. It's about 7 minutes per presenter. So if you want to stick to the time so that we can have a very good discussions. So now we have our next presenter, who's going to be Professor Peter Delaville from the University of Cape Town. If you're up next, you can share your screen.
Yes, thanks, Oliver. I hope you can see this. I'll try to keep it short and sweet.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update on what is happening in terms of Food Samza, the project that also started nearly 2 years ago now, but a slight delay in the onset. We've got some preliminary findings, but I will mostly point out where they will be discussed, because there's going to be a few presentations tomorrow also in the parallel tracks around this. Acknowledgement of the funder is the German government. This is the core team, but there is this is not complete. There's still more stuff. I couldn't just fit them all on one slide, but so it basically consists of people from University of the Western Cape, South African Medical Research Council, University of Cape Town, and the colleagues from Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, in Germany. Aim and objectives, as a few other projects that were discussed this afternoon, is also looking at the double burden of malnutrition. We actually had quite a bit of a discussion around the use of the exact terminology, whether we would go for double or triple burden of, but we stuck with the double one because that seems to be the most commonly used term in still in our circles here. We also use a socio-ecological framework looking at the different levels, micro, meso, and macro, in order to have a maximum impact, and also look at how best to achieve double duty actions, as said, as addressed before in previous presentations, also by looking both at policies and at interventions at community level and also personal level. This is basically how the project is structured. We've got 8 work packages, so we've got a couple of transversal ones. The first one speaks to the need to map the system. It's always a prerequisite because it's a complex system. If you want to know where to intervene, you need to know where to find the points of leverage. But a lot of work on this has been done in South Africa at macro level, at policy level or national level, if you want. So we decided to focus on the micro level, meaning we work with local communities and see what is their experience, their typical acquisition behavior, mostly working with food diaries, more quantitative than qualitative at this point, in order to find out how we can influence that by looking at the local food environments and the actors in the environment, and then transcending and trying to influence the system from above by looking at the macro national policy levels, if you want, by adapting and implementing a few modules of Informos, namely the food EPI. It's an updated version of the 2016 one, the exercise that was done in 2016. And the BIA obesity for looking at private sector influence and the outdoor advertising module. So we're using different Informos modules to look at the food system in South Africa and how best to nudge it in a positive way. So in short, work package 1, it's the systems mapping. So far, we've just published the protocol for the exercise itself. It's basically, well, it's a 2-step process. We start with doing some interviews with key informants in order to collect what is called seed variables in group model building, because group model building is the tool that we use to work with stakeholders. It's as much looking at the outcomes of the group model building process, which is finally or ultimately producing a few causal loop diagrams or complex systems maps, where we would then identify the points of leverage based on the number of weak points, if you want. But this process needs to be informed by preliminary exercise, and that is based on the interviews with key informants, which will, as said, then deliver those seed variables that will feed into those complex systems maps. This is an exercise that is planned for the next quarter, early next year. So if you're interested, we can have a look at the protocol for what we are about to do. We have used group model building in other sectors of in health policy and systems research, and worked with health service managers. So it's as much a process that is focused on the outcome as it is on the process itself, because it is quite empowering. It is for people literally to go see the big picture if you're involved in this. Quite often, if you work with lower level, middle level managers, they find it very resourceful. So the second work package is looking at adapting and implementing the BIA obesity tool. So looking at the impact of private sector in terms of policies related to addressing the double burden of malnutrition. But given that the original BIA obesity module was only focusing on high-income countries and obesity, well, and so hence looking at obesity and overnutrition, and excluded or did not include undernutrition. This is what we are focusing on, and what the colleagues from Munich have been very intensely been working around. So the number of indicators that have to be updated, and that is based on an extensive scoping review, the protocol of which has also been published on Open Science, and the process itself has also been presented earlier this year at the ISBN PA conference. Carmen Klinger will talk about this also tomorrow in track A. Based on this indicated data sets or indicator sets, which will also be confirmed or corroborated, if you want, through a Delphi process with policy experts, that will then be submitted to a pilot in South Africa, in which we will gauge the impact of the private food sector using the updated indicator data sets. That will be done through a series of interviews, which will also include, of course, private sector representatives. And the aim is to benchmark current policies, private sector policies, against international best practice, very much so as like what is happening for the what we'll do for the food EPI, the third work package, where we also update the indicators, not only for South Africa, but it is basically looking at the context of the double burden of malnutrition again. So what has happened is that the Informous core group has already worked on an expansion of the basic indicator data set, of 46 or 47 indicators that are split over the two components and the, is it 14 domains? And resulting in the addition of 12 additional indicators, if I'm correct, related to very specifically to undernutrition. So it's mostly related to, for example, breast milk substitutes, policy regulation, maternal protection, etc. So specific indicators that relate to the aspect of undernutrition and that are now being merged or added to the existing indicator data sets. That process is, of course, also quite tedious because it has to be checked, double-checked, it has to be verified or validated by a team of core experts, in conjunction then with the development of an evidence document. It is called an evidence document because it somehow it lists all the current public health policies in a given country, together with what is being done in other countries, not in theory, but what is happening. So that is called best practice examples, BPE. That is added to the evidence document and then submitted again to a number of key experts who can validate, and that is being used in our case, it was being done at the same time through the benchmarking workshop, in which a number of overall 12 key experts, both from academia, one policymaker and one civil society representative, rated the implementation of current, not the implementation, sorry, the existence of current policies in terms of public health nutrition in South Africa against the international, not standards, but international examples or best practice examples. And this ultimately, of course, to identify priority areas for action. Follow-up workshop is being scheduled for early next year. Next workshop, or the next work package rather, is looking at aspects of the food environment, again using an Informous module, the outdoor advertising protocol. In this body of work, we went into 3 local communities, basically townships in the greater Cape Town area or metropole, where the number of food and beverage ads were being tagged, geotagged, using a digital tool in order to map them on in terms of density, location, proximity to schools. And that is a very specific point of concern. So how often do you find these ads in the close proximity of schools, as has been also addressed by the previous some of the previous speakers. So we were looking at a buffer zone of around 100 meters around primary and secondary schools. And these are preliminary findings, which will be presented later on at the European Public Health Conference. So this is just a snapshot of what we know at this point. So you can see that core healthy foods is only 1 in 5. So the big majority of ads is, of course, for the non-core and unhealthy foods. 75% of the nearly 1,000 ads that were recorded in these townships consist of ads for single products, half of them for sugar-sweetened beverages, including energy drinks, and 35% of those SSB ads were found in close proximity to primary and secondary school, with a significantly higher presence around secondary schools. There is also going to be a body of work around leveraging the informal food business to improve the community food environment. So, of course, we have to somehow nudge the environments to become more healthy. And that is why looking at a previously developed street food vending model framework, which will be adapted for use also by spaza shop owners, spaza or tuck shop owners that are the informal business shop owners that are sometimes difficult to involve in the research, but that is why we need to look at their business model, because for them it's very much about doing business, as for the informal trade in general, of course. So this is a body of work that somehow depends on, that will be linked to the previous work package and will happen in the course of next year. Then finally, there's last part that looks at the interpersonal sphere, if you want, working with community health workers, industry communities, and their food literacy, because they act as a bridge with the local communities. It is a body of work, and that is called multimedia education entertainment, or entertainment education. That is being led by Prof. Chiza from SAMRC and previously UWC in those same communities, and involves a high quality sort of production of comic booklets, pamphlets, so with a low threshold for literacy levels, and that indeed is meant to increase or improve food literacy. Preliminary results, again, of which are shown to be positive and will also be highlighted by another colleague also tomorrow in track D, so I won't go into detail here. Then the other work packages are related to capacity network building, so capacity building, that's why we partner with FERN, with Amos's network, Meals for NCDs, and that we are trying to increase network strength, that we will reach out to the network in terms of doing some mapping of research clusters in Africa, and that we have engaged in a number of webinars this year, and we'll continue to do so next year. There's also a number of students that are being trained. And then there is the IKT component, where which most of you are familiar with, I guess, so I won't spend any more time on this. If there's any questions, specific questions or other comments, please feel free to reach out, any one of us. This is the website and the Twitter handle. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much, Peter, for this very exciting. That's definitely a lot of work. And I was excited when you were talking about work package 2 and then the 3D update to the 3 and the 5. I'm pretty sure that a lot of questions regarding the work in South Africa. And I was also impressed how in the work in Kenya on the advertisement and the mapping on advertisement also in South Africa, preliminary findings, they pretty much converge with what has been observed in Ghana. So that's really interesting. Our next presenter is going to be Christine, if I'm right. Yes, on behalf of her team. So I see you already share your slides, but we can see your notes. Do you want to readjust?
Sure, it's not Christine, it's Isabel.
Okay,
according to the schedule. Am I?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let me see. Perfect, thank you. So my name is Isabel Mazorera, and I am presenting on behalf of FERA. It's an initiative on the future of health and economic resilience in Africa. So the FERA's project is a Lancet project that was started to really look at what are some of the leverage points across different areas in Africa that could be used to improve economic and health resiliency. And it's co-led by Minister
I think you're
Mohamed
muted.
Pate, who is now, I think, one of the ministers in Nigeria, but formerly head of nutrition and health at the World Bank, and also co-led by Minister Marie Colsac, who is a minister within the government of Senegal. As part of this, we developed a working group on food systems as one of maybe 13 working groups. We thought that food systems is central to really efforts to improve health and economic resilience in Africa. Next slide, please. So we've already, a lot of presenters have been talking about the triple burden of malnutrition. And just to add some of the statistics, we know that about 278 million people globally are, 278 million people on the African continent actually are undernourished. And this is based on the latest SOFI report. And it shows that the number of undernourished people on the African continent had been declining, but it started to increase again. We know that anemia prevalence is quite high, approximately 40% of children under 5, also affecting pregnant women and adolescents. We also know that despite declining prevalence of stunting, which is a plus for the continent, in absolute numbers, we are seeing an increase in the number of children that are stunted. Next slide, please. Now, another, as we've been talking about the triple burden, also just to put numbers to it, we know that about 10 million children on the African continent are overweight and obese. And this is based on the latest report from UNICEF. And so we think that this rising tide of triple burden of malnutrition is closely related to food systems, as you've all been mentioning. But in addition, one of the key statistics that have been surprising for us, we talk about increasing NCDs, but when you look at the actual numbers, so we know that 1 in 22 adults in sub-Saharan Africa is living with diabetes. This is quite staggering. We also anticipate that about 134% increase by the year 2045. And also we think that the prevalence, based on WHO, the prevalence of hypertension in Africa is about 46%. And a lot of these diseases are undiagnosed within the African continent. And cardiovascular diseases are some of the largest contributor to morbidity and mortality on the continent. Next slide, please. And so we think that addressing all these things through healthy diets and through food systems is quite key as part of our efforts. To guide our thinking through this process, we referred to the entire food system framework. So I know that most of the presenters in this conference have been focusing on the food environment, but we think that the problem is really throughout the entire food system value chain. So issues around agriculture, production and supply, as well as food availability, food prices and affordability that are part of the food environment, and also issues around consumer behaviors that many have spoken about ultimately impact diets and nutrition and health. But you also think about things like climate change, like policies that others have been alluding to that can impact food systems in a negative way. So thinking through all these areas and how could African food systems be optimized to try and get us to a place where we can afford healthy diets for the majority of the population is what really kick-started this work. Next slide, please. So as part of this working group, what we decided to do as we came together using, this is a working group that is composed of key technical experts on the African continent, and I'll show them later. But we developed this work into, I would say, 7 streams of work. One looking at the resilience of food systems in Africa to COVID-19, as well as future public health emergencies. The second one was looking at food systems and their links to diet-related chronic diseases. The third one was looking at food systems and all forms of malnutrition, looking at the undernutrition and the micronutrient deficiencies, also being included in that part. We also looked at food loss and waste in food systems because this is increasingly an area of concern. The 5th area was looking at strategies and policies to enhance diet quality, how to restrict marketing of unhealthy foods or availability of unhealthy foods, but also incentivizing healthy food consumption. We also thought about the role of traditional and indigenous crops and foods and healthy diets. And this is really a neglected area where some of these crops have really fallen off our diets and off our plates, but are a critical piece as we think about transforming food systems. And then finally, we thought about how can we overhaul food systems as a whole in Africa to achieve healthy diets. So this is truly ambitious, but we thought, and it doesn't encompass everything that is important within food systems, but we thought that these were some of the critical gaps that are worth looking into. Next slide, please. Now, the methodology that we use is that we use scoping reviews, literature reviews, and we also looked at published and gray literature. We also have done some basic analysis of data and also country case studies to try and understand the gaps. Just to highlight that the work that I'll present today, or some of the findings that I'll present today, are preliminary. We continue to delve into these topics into greater detail, and we have working groups that are really working and doing further data analysis and also writing manuscripts on this. Next slide, please. So in terms of some of the key, just to summarize our key findings based on the literature reviews, critically, we find that food systems on the African continent are failing to deliver safe, nutritious, and healthy foods for all and at all times. They're also failing to provide a livelihood. We know that a significant proportion of the continent relies on food systems and agriculture as a source of their livelihoods. In addition, we know that food systems are also contributing to environmental degradation and affecting, climate change. We know that there are inefficiencies across African food system value chains, where we think that our food systems are leveraging or are really promoting staple foods at the cost of enhancing productivity for key foods that are nutrient rich. But we also think that as far as comparing productivity, for example, for livestock and food, livestock and crops on the African continent, compared to other continents, our productivity is low. We have extensive food loss and waste. When we think about nutrition and dietary transition, as many have alluded to, we are in a place where we are in a double whammy, where really undernutrition has been there, it still continues to be there, but the link to overweight and obesity and NCDs has been astronomical, and really we are struggling with this. And we think that really, as many have alluded to, there's been a transformation in terms of preferences and demands for foods across the African continent. And we believe that as nutritionists and practitioners, sometimes we are not fully being cognizant of how to, of these changes and how to intervene in this. We think that policy remedies are currently limited on the African continent, that we have increasing availability of cheap and nutrient-poor foods, ultra-processed foods as well. In terms of resilience, we saw during COVID that our continent is not resilient because the cost of food really went up high during the COVID-19 pandemic. And really food prices were impacted, food security and diet quality was impacted. So really these are some of the key challenges. Next slide, please. In terms of our emerging recommendations, like I say, these are just preliminary, and we will further develop this in other papers and other products. So one of the first recommendations we had was to increase production access and affordability of healthy diets by shifting agriculture policies, frameworks, and production systems in Africa that have been focusing on staple foods. We're not saying that we should stop supporting staple foods, but we need to put as much energy into developing nutrient-dense foods, such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, and animal source foods. And that includes developing cold chains to support these foods, and as well as food value chains for all these different crops. The second one is around reducing food loss and waste. And this is closely tied into the one above in terms of how do we increase investment in technology to decrease food loss and waste. Much of the literature has focused on food waste in high-income countries, but food loss at the farm level and at the household level, particularly for African households that are farming, is really high. But the problem is we don't even know how to what extent. There's limited data. Sorry, you went too fast. There's limited data on the extent of food loss, and this is worrisome. And then we also thought that promoting regional trade and market integration is key for the African continent if we are to think big picture, because regional trade can help us take advantage of food that is produced across different countries. And we have some efforts under CARIB to do this, but I think that we have not been doing enough. And we need to do this to improve growth and stabilize prices and create employment. Next slide, please. And our other recommendation is really reducing inequities within food systems. I think that a lot of efforts around food systems, or a lot of resources, are available for larger producers, but they are unfavorable to women, small-scale farmers, and youths, and small agribusiness. So I think we propose that greater investment in this group, which seems to lag behind, particularly when we think about smallholder farmers being the people that are most affected by undernutrition and overnutrition in some sectors as well, but also really just a group that is vulnerable to climate change and many things. I think that we ought to really restructure how we develop support systems for these groups, and also supporting youths, particularly with technologies that can advance agriculture production. The fifth recommendation was around research, innovation, technology, and data. Like, really, when we started doing this work, it was shocking and mind-blowing to us how there's so limited data. We talk about the link between food systems, diets, and NCDs. We are doing a meta-analysis. There is very little data on the African continent. Most of the studies are cross-sectional. We have very limited prospective cohort studies or RCTs that are evaluating these problems. We have big issues with data availability for food loss and waste at the national and subnational levels, and also research that is translating evidence into actions. So I think that those are some of the key issues that we wanted to address. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps, we are continuing, like I said, to delve into this work. We will develop a Lancet report that will incorporate some of our findings, but we'll also produce over the next few months manuscripts and policy briefs, as well as case studies to highlight some of the key challenges and opportunities really to address or intervene in African food systems. And we will also think about partnership at the country level and engaging with policymakers through the African Union, through the core chairs of FERA. Next step, please. Next slide, sorry. So just to end with sharing the members of the Food Systems Working Group. And as you can see, Dr. Amosla is part of this group, but many others based across different parts of Africa have been part of the thinking and sort of also working with other teams. I think Silva is part of, has been doing some of the work also related to this. So really trying to think across the African continent and come up with critical solutions. I think I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very exciting presentation and trying to address the food system issues of Africa at the system level. That's really nice. I would want to rush to the next presenter, and just to remind everybody that we'll have a Q&A session. I can see in the chat box there are a lot of questions, and I've been I also have some questions too, so we'll get back to that. So our next presenter, Christine, are you on the call? Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Celine, you're sharing the screen?
We can hear you faintly.
Hello, can you hear me?
Better now. Yes, very much. Yeah.
Yes. Celine, please share the screen.
You do have your slides?
Yes, just a minute. My colleague is sharing the screen.
Okay. What's your colleague name, please?
Celine. She's on. I think she's sharing the screen.
Okay, I'm coming. I have to give her rights.
Ah, okay. Celine Termote.
No problem. Okay. So Celine, I think now you can share a screen.
Okay, I wasn't able to do anything indeed.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Celine Termote, and together with Christine and Mark, we are working for the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SIAT. We are working in the Food Environment and Consumer Behavior Research Program at the Alliance, where we have like 4 key topics around which we are working. The first one is sustainable healthy diets. Under this team, we do work on dietary shifts and land use changes, but we also work, for example, on influencing the consumers of tomorrow. We have another pillar of work around inclusive food environment, whereby we look at availability and affordability of nutrient-dense foods, but we also look at income and employment and agency for youth, women, and people living in poverty, people working in these food environments. Our third pillar of work is around shifting the political economy of food systems governance. And for example, here we do work on improving multi-stakeholder engagement for food system action, but also we are engaging in global, regional, and national processes to influence discourses. And finally, our last pillar of work turns around homegrown school feeding programs, trying to improve policy coherence and South-South learning at the national and international scales. But to make that a little bit more like concrete and visible, I would like to briefly present 3 of our current ongoing projects. The first one is the Sustainable Healthy Diets through Food Systems Transformation Initiative. This is a 1CGR initiative. In this initiative, we look at the retail food environment as a driver of consumer choices, as well as a source of decent livelihoods for the actors in these food environments. Shift is currently being implemented in Vietnam, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh, and we are counting expanding in the next phase also into Benin, Senegal, Honduras, and India. Our goals are, first of all, to stimulate demand for and consumption of sustainable healthy diets. Secondly, we aim to support micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, and informal sector actors to deliver more nutritious, safe, affordable, and sustainably produced foods. Thirdly, we would like to improve livelihoods, gender equity, and social inclusiveness in all food system actors. Now, we have developed a very ambitious research plan to study food environments, consumers, and MSMEs. And we started this work in Vietnam last year, this year also in Ethiopia. And here I quickly present a snapshot of what is currently being done with the data. On the left, we are mapping out the food environment to study the exposure of consumers to healthy as well as unhealthy foods, and we will analyze how this influences the diets. We are also doing qualitative studies to look into the drivers of food choices and the lived experiences. In other words, where, when, and what foods we buy is influenced, obviously, by what is offered in the food environment, but it is also strongly tangled with other activities, such as going to and from school, to work, etc. And finally, on the right, we can see we found 3 dietary patterns in the adolescents in our Vietnam study sites. We are also, for example, implementing some co-creation activities with adolescents in the different sites in order to co-identify the issues within the food environment, but also come towards action-oriented activities. Now, on the MSME and informal sector side, we produced so far a number of case studies within Shift. And one way to improve fruits and vegetable consumptions is to actually target the barriers that these MSMEs are facing in growing their businesses. A very interesting example of transforming food systems through informal vendors is the case study of how Twiga is transforming the Kenyan food system. Twiga Foods is a technology-enabled food distribution company in Kenya that is connecting produce from farmers to vendors in the slums of Nairobi, and this through a cashless mobile-based app where vendors can place orders, even on credit sometimes, so that they don't need capital to start their businesses. And in that way, fresh fruits and vegetables are made more available to the consumers in the urban slums of Nairobi. Now, this is the second project we would like to quickly present, which is called Piloting an Organic Food System in Kenya by connecting vulnerable consumers in Nairobi with small-scale producers in Makueni County. This project is funded by BioVision Foundation Switzerland. And basically, it all turns around connecting these urban poor consumers with farmers implementing regenerative agriculture and food forests. And this through co-creating and piloting a niche food system. And ultimately also providing science-based evidence for the transformational potential of this niche food system to prove that an alternative to the current dominant model in Kenya does exist, while also trying to pull the main system towards more sustainability. We are working with different partners in this project. Our first partner is DAT, Diabetes Awareness Trust. They are mainly in charge of Objective 1 in the project, through awareness campaigns, nutrition education and counseling. They contribute to increased awareness and better practices related to food acquisition and preparation, promoting healthy diets for the urban poor consumers in Makadara sub-county, where Viwandani slum is located. Our second partner, Feedback to the Future, is mainly in charge of objective number 3, working with the small-scale farmers in Makueni County and promoting agroecology and syntropic agroforestry practices. In that sense, they want to contribute to fair incomes and decent livelihoods for those small-scale farmers. Now, the Alliance of Biodiversity and SEAT is mainly in charge of objective number 4, which is the pilot testing of the model, the providing of science-based evidence, and ultimately also disseminating our results for evidence-based decision-making and scaling. Now, all together, all the partners together are in charge of objective number 2, which is all about co-creation of new business models on how to link these farmers producing healthy, sustainable, safe foods with the vulnerable consumers in a cost-effective way, so that farmers have fair incomes, but consumers get improved access to affordable, organic, and nutritious foods. And with this, we also work closely in collaboration with Nairobi County and with Makueni County. And very quickly, and this project has just started this year, but we've already done kind of a GIS mapping of the vendors that are selling foods in Viwandani slum. And from these slides, we can see the density of the vendors on the right, but we can also see that most vendors in Viwandani are kind of selling cooked foods, street foods or roadside catering. This is followed by kiosks or duka, where people can buy small things. And on the third place, we find the mamambogas, that are tabletop vendors selling fruits, vegetables, but all types of stuff actually. And on the fourth place, we find ambulant vendors or street hawkers, that were about 10% of the vendors inventoried. All the other categories, butchers, wholesalers, wet markets, were far less found in Viwandani. And with this, I give the word to Christine, who is going to continue on the third project.
Thank you, Celine. So this third project, that is, we call it Healthy Food Africa project, which is looking at improving nutrition in Africa by strengthening the diversity, sustainability, resilience, and connectivity of food systems. And we are implementing this project with 17 partners. It's a EU-funded project, so 17 partners across Africa and Europe. And the project is in 10 African cities within 6 countries. And today I just want to focus on the work that we are doing in Kenya here within one of the cities, that's Kisumu City. And we have a Kisumu Food System Lab where we are implementing different interventions under this project. So within the Kisumu Food System Lab, we are working very closely with the county government of Kisumu, and we are implementing the work in 4 informal settlements and activities cut across different components of the food system, from the urban food environment, working with the urban consumers, especially interventions within with the interventions on the diets for children and also women of reproductive age, and also looking at the value chains, especially fish and indigenous leafy vegetables. There are different components of the project which we are also implementing in Kisumu. So we cut across the issues to do with the value chain and governance, sustainable food productions, and looking at innovative production approaches and innovative food products, developing new products that are going to make nutritious and healthy foods available and accessible to slum consumers. Next, please. Next slide, please. So just to give a highlight of some of the activities we're already implementing in Kisumu, We've already done a full census of the vendors within the 4 food environments to understand what kind of vendors we have, what are the challenges in terms of making nutritious foods available to the slum consumers, and then what kind of foods do they sell. And we see on the left side of the slide, we have all the different colors of the different dotted colors of the vendors, which shows a high population of the kiosks and the dukas, again, very much in line with what Selina has just presented for Viwandani. And we see a lot of street vendors. Those are the light blues and the light greens, and also the orange colors, the light orange, which are the roadside vendors. So we see a mix of more of the informal vendors in those areas, and not much of the formal vendors, food vendors in the Sunday areas. And then we went deeper to conduct in-depth assessment of the food environment. So understanding the vendors specifically, what exact foods they sell, looking at the healthy options and the unhealthy options. What are the barriers of selling these foods to different consumers? And then we interviewed the consumers also. So at the household level, we were looking at what foods are they purchasing and what are the sources of the foods that they are purchasing within the household. What are the barriers of purchasing these foods in terms of access, affordability, availability, and all that? And we did a 24-hour recall study for to understand the consumption behavior of children under between 6 and 23 months, but also for women of reproductive age. In addition to that, we also did a full value chain assessment to understand the food flow from production to consumption and the challenges that come along in terms of making these foods safely delivered to the consumers in those target areas. Next slide, please. And just some highlight of some of the interventions we are already implementing in those areas. Some of the challenges we identified from the studies were issues to do with availability and affordability of the vegetables. Like we would find some of the consumers are just consuming one type of vegetable and not even regularly, because they say it's very expensive, we can't consume these vegetables throughout, we cannot afford it. Or even the vendors, when they're selling the vegetables, they're not fresh, they're not safe to consume for the consumers. So we are currently doing some interventions on the side of the consumers, but also on the side of the vendors, to make sure that the foods, these especially fruits and vegetables and also fish, are available and accessible and affordable to consumers, and also they're safe. So we see on the left-hand side some interventions on the urban gardens, where we are implementing gardens within the households of the slum consumers that we are working with. And they're setting up different types of urban gardens, vertical gardens, hanging gardens, team gardens, and they're producing their own vegetables. At the same time, we have community learning gardens, where we have a garden at the community level. And this is a learning session, a learning area where communities and different actors within that area come together to learn how to produce the vegetables. And they have agronomic support, they have support on how to produce, how to save, to keep it safe, and also how to cook. On the right-hand side, we see the nutrition education activities that are going on in the slums. And this connects the links with the production activities, because the consumers then learn how to cook and how to prepare their foods and also heat it safely. Last slide, please. And in addition to these two interventions, we also have a lot of other interventions in terms of multi-stakeholder engagements, developing innovative products, especially on fish and vegetables, and also training the vendors how to, for example, smoke fish instead of deep frying them with the oils that are not safe, and then addressing challenges within the fish and indigenous vegetable value chains, looking at the issues to do with the governance, market linkage, post-harvest loss, and also how vendors collect their vegetables and sell them to consumers. I think that was the last slide. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just to quickly, I would like to call on to Gideon. Gideon and your colleague, are you ready to present? Thank you. Just a reminder that would have to be very snappy. Thanks.
Can you see my screen? Is it clear enough?
Yes, we can see your screen. You can go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to present our project, which is developing a national nutrient profiling system to support food system transformation in Nigeria. We're currently on the project phase 1, which is getting stakeholder buy-in and support and consensus on the development and implementation of this nutrient profiling system. We are working in partnership with GAIN and funded by IDRC and the Rockefeller Foundation. I believe the previous speakers have already established the fact that the double burden of malnutrition is very much prevalent in low and middle income countries. I would like to zoom into Nigeria. Of course, undernutrition is very much a public health concern, but there's increasing prevalence of overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. In 2018, the WHO actually said that 29% of deaths in Nigeria is caused by non-communicable diseases. According to global research, the second major risk factor for mortality and morbidity is actually diet. So we see the importance of diet in health. Also, I know that a lot of food is gotten in informal markets in Africa, but we all know that there's increasing number of ultra-processed foods being sold and increasing number of supermarkets in urban areas in Africa, as well as Nigeria. And acne, based on studies, have shown that the proportion of healthy packaged foods in low and middle income countries is below the average, which is 31%. So of course, that calls for reformulation of foods into healthier options. So in 2021, the United Nations Food System Dialogues held, and Nigeria was part of that dialogues, which led to the development of the pathways for food system transformation in Nigeria. One of the priority actions is to develop a nutrient profiling system to guide food labeling, nutrition and health claims, and restriction of marketing of food to children. A nutrient profiling system is a double duty action that can actually address various forms of malnutrition, undernutrition, as well as overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. What is a nutrient profiling system? This is a science that categorizes food based on its nutritional value. As we can see the diagram on the right, it usually has disqualifying ingredients such as total fats, SAFA, cholesterol, sodium, sugar, and of course qualifying ingredients such as various micronutrients. There are various applications of a nutrient profiling system. It can be applied to various food environment policies, such as being standards for school foods, front of pack labeling, restriction of marketing to children, taxation, subsidies, reformulation, and what have you. The major objective of our project is to support Nigeria with its plan to develop a national nutrient profiling system that is science-based, context-specific, and also based on international best practices. The goals of the project is to identify and prioritize actions to develop and implement this nutrient profiling system, to develop a shared agenda amongst various stakeholders in the food and nutrition space, and also to identify research areas. So based on that, we are using the Healthy Food Environment Policy Index to implement the project phase 1. We are using it to gather evidence to share with stakeholders in order to make well-informed decisions for Nigeria. As you can see, I think someone already gave like the meaning of the importance of Healthy Food Environment Policy Index. This helps countries to analyze their food environment, to look at policy gaps, implementation gaps, and ways to improve. It can be analyzed based on the national policies, but also best international practices. We can see various policies, domains. It looks at the food composition, food labeling, food promotion, food provision, retail prices, but also looks at the infrastructure supports, which is a conducive environment to implement these policies. Effective public policies are very much important in increasing the healthiness of food environments, and therefore should be monitored closely. We used this index to analyze the food and nutrition policies, regulation, and standards in Nigeria, to identify policy priorities, policy gaps, implementation gaps surrounding food environments in Nigeria. We adapted this process in order, based on, of course, the evidence from the food system dialogues, which already gave us something to work with. And of course, the limited time and resources as well, stakeholders have agreed to adapt this process. So the first we did was to analyze relevant government food and nutrition policies in the country. We convened stakeholders. We also use the rating tool to assess to what extent the government has acted on these policies. And also we are about to identify and prioritize actions that we can take forward based on importance and feasibility of the context. So we did a desk research, we've done a first stakeholder meeting, and we're about to do the next stakeholder meeting sometime this month. For the desk review, we looked at government and non-government databases and various websites to identify various food and nutrition policies in the country. We looked at policies from 2010 up until date, and we analyzed them based on the food EPI index, so the policy domains, as well as the infrastructure support domains. These are some of the results that we got in terms of the food composition. There are some targets based on nutrients of public health concern, like salt, trans fat in Nigeria, but there's none of home meals for food service outlets. Also, for every prepackaged foods in the country, there's mandatory food labeling, so specifically back of pack labeling, and there's no front of pack labeling in the country. Food promotion as well, there's a lot of emphasis on breast milk substitutes, and also restriction of marketing to children on broadcast media. Also for food prices, there's sugar sweetened beverage tax, which is 10 liter per drink, 10 naira per liter, which is mainly volumetric instead of nutrient specific, of course, if you want to address the double burden of malnutrition. And also there's some standards for food provision, which is focused mainly of homegrown school feeding program. And there's not a lot of work that has been done in terms of food retail and food trade and investments. So that shows there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the food environment policies in the country. However, there's a conducive infrastructure support with a lot of strong political will, as well as government systems with a lot of platforms for partners and organizations to engage in terms of improving the food environment space. And currently, there's a lot of work that is being done in terms of addressing non-communicable diseases. So these are some of the outcomes of the first stakeholder workshop. They would like, of course, a nutrient profiling system that addresses both undernutrition as well as overweight, obesity, and NCDs. There's need for building on the work that has already been done in terms of the food-based dietary guidelines. It needs to be aligned with food-based dietary, food-based guidelines. And then it needs to also encourage technical capacity building for relevant functionaries within the food environment. And also price came out as very important in terms of consumers and buying foods in the supermarkets. So this is very much important, because in as much as we want to make foods affordable, that can be accessed by the majority part of the population. So these are some of the outcomes of that meeting. And so the next steps we have is the next stakeholder meeting, which is going to be held sometime this month. There we will commit on the specific food policies that Nigeria wants to focus on, that will be supported by the to be developed nutrient profiling system and some research areas. Some of the research areas that came up is the nutrient composition data base that may need to be either developed or adapted. Also, there needs to be some research in terms of the consumer terrain on best ways, for consumer education and also advocacy strategies, as well as behavioral change programs that needs to go in line with this development and implementation. So these are some of the research that has come up, and we're hoping to get more during the next stakeholder workshop. I believe Gideon will give more extensive research in terms of food labeling and food promotion that has been done so far.
Okay,
Right.
Gideon, is it the same presentation or a different presentation for Gideon?
Yeah.
Okay, because the time was intended to be shared between both of you. I don't know if he has prepared another set of presentation.
Okay, Gideon, are you online? Maybe you can share your slide.
Let me, I'm hosting him. Because the time is out, and then we would want to move to the last presenter.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so our last presentation for today is going to be by Jane and her colleague. There, it's less than 7 minutes, about 3-minute presentation. So they will quickly, it's pre-recorded, and they will quickly tell us a bit about the project.
Hello everyone, my name is Jane Battersby from the Department of Environmental and Geographical Science at the University of Cape Town. I'm the co-lead from the Arua side of the new Cluster of Excellence in Food Environment Actions for the Promotion of Health.
And my name is Meena Devadanam from the Department of Women's and Children's Health at Uppsala University, and I'm the co-lead on the Guild side for this cluster. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Arua and the Guild, Arua is an alliance of research institutions in the African region, while the Guild is the same for the European region. And it's also good to note that not all research institutions in the two regions are represented by these two alliances. In this short presentation, Jane and I will briefly talk about the vision of our cluster and about who our partners are.
The new Cluster of Excellence on Food Environments officially launches in January. And at the heart of what we're doing is this recognition that the triple burden of malnutrition is a critical public health challenge, undermining the health of populations worldwide. And the cluster works in both African and European contexts to try and understand commonalities and differences across these contexts and what lessons can be learned across contexts. We recognize as part of the cluster that the health and nutrition challenges are driven by these intersecting processes of things like urbanization, of socioeconomic inequalities, of food systems transformations. And yet often the research focuses on one or two of these at a time. So what the cluster is hoping to do is to change the field of food environment research by challenging the current disciplinary and geographic silos, to pull people together and to advance the field of food environment studies, both methodologically, but also thinking about the kinds of practice, governance, and policy interventions we might be able to make. And so at the heart of it are these kind of 3 points of engagement. The first is about methodological and theoretical advancement, thinking about reciprocal innovation, developing new approaches and indicators, new mixed and multi-methods approaches, trying to think about how we engage the lived experience of populations across our settings. The second is really a core element, which is around capacity development in the next generation, developing the next generation of global scholars and practitioners. So we're thinking around developing future cohorts of masters, doctoral and postdoctoral scholars, and enabling exchange across regions. And then finally, really thinking about the policy interventions, thinking around urban planning, for example, as a way to advance food environments, to incorporate lived experiences into policy making, to broaden the sets of conversations we're having around policy and governance. So really about capacity development, cross-partnership, cross-disciplinary partnership, cross-regional dialogue, and trying to find novel ways of intervening in policy and governance landscapes. We would really welcome your engagement in our cluster.
And now to round it off with who are we? Apart from our two institutions, the University of Cape Town and Uppsala University, who co-lead this particular cluster, we have other core partners, that is, partner institutions who are part of either the Guild or ARUA. On the ARUA side, we have Makerere University School of Public Health, represented by Juliet Shiguli and David Guathude, and the University of Ghana, represented by Amos Lar. On the Guild side, we have the University of Glasgow, represented by Graham Young. In addition, we have other academic and non-academic partners listed here, with whom we will collaborate closely for the activities of the cluster. Now, let me end this presentation by reiterating that an overarching aim of the Guild-ARUA partnerships is to foster equitable collaborations. So watch the space and follow our activities as we take off in January 2024. Thank you.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of this series of presentations. And I would like now to open the floor for questions if you have questions. I know the chat box was very active during the presentations. So anybody with any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or to just ask your question directly in the chat box.